When he got back to town, he locked his bike up and went into the bakery, where he helped his mother stack the fresh loaves, swept the floor and waited on a couple of customers before the shop closed up for lunch. Then he followed his parents upstairs to their apartment above the bakery. "How far did you ride today?" his father asked once they were seated at the round table in the space that served as a kitchen and a dining room. A gas stove, sink and small icebox lined one wall. The other held an open hutch where all the dishes were stored. "About 3 kilometres, Marcel said. His father was interested in cycling and the Tour de France too, and they liked talking about it. If France had not been occupied by the Germans, they would have gone to see this year's Tour de France together. Marcel took a bite of his food. Last night, his mother made a cassoulet, a stew of sausages, beans and bacon. With all the food shortages and rationing in town, he didn't know how she'd managed to get the ingredients. But there wasn't all that much left today, and there was no bread. All the loaves from the bakery had been sold, forcing her to close early, and they had even gone through the stale loaves his mother saved to toast. "And did you run into any soldiers?" his mother asked. "Just one." Marcel ate eagerly. Not only was he hungry, he also hoped that if he ate more, he would grow taller. "Over by the bridge." He caught the look his parents exchanged. "Was he French? Did he stop you?" his father asked. "Yes, but then he let me go ahead." "That's the second time now," his mother said. "Or is it the third?" "I don't know," said Marcel. "Does it matter?" There was a weighted silence, during which the clink of the cutlery could be heard. Finally, his father said, "After lunch, I'd like you to deliver something to Marie-Pierre and Benoit." The question about the guard was left unanswered. All right. Marie-Pierre was his father's sister, and Benoit was her husband. They lived in a town that was a few kilometres away, and Marcel often brought them bread or pastries. He did wonder why his father hadn't asked him to do it earlier when he'd gone on the errand for his mother. But this time he did not protest. When lunch was over, Marcel went back outside to get his bicycle. "These are 2 loaves of bread for your aunt and uncle," his father said, handing him a parcel wrapped in white cloth. That was another strange thing. His mother had said there was no bread for lunch. Why didn't she serve one of these loaves? His aunt and uncle had no children, so they could have easily done with just 1 loaf. "And this is for the soldiers, in case you get stopped again," his father was saying. "For the soldiers? Why?" Marcel asked. The package was wrapped in red and white checked dish towel and contained a panned piece. Gingerbread. He recognised the smell. "It doesn't hurt to be polite," said father, "and if you give them some cake, they might be less likely to bother you." Marcel put both parcels in the basket of his bike. He was just about to leave when his mother came outside. The worried look was on her face again. "Don't give them the bread," she said. "Why not?" "They'll like the cake better," she said sharply. He looked at his mother in surprise. What was wrong with her these days? Whatever it was, she wasn't telling. Marcel swung his leg over the slightly beat-up bike. How he wished he had a brand new racing bicycle, a Peugeot or a Gitane, like the Tour de France riders used. On his bedroom was a big poster of Victor Cosson, the 3rd place winner from 1938. Marcel wanted this poster because, unlike the 1st and 2nd place winners, Cosson was French. Cosson stood holding a sleek bicycle with curved silver handles. Maybe one day Marcel would have a bike like that. Maybe one day he'd even be able to enter the race. Pedalling along the cobblestones, he once again reached the edge of town. He travelled in the same direction he had this morning. Only when he came to the bridge, he took a right turn, not a left. As he approached, Marcel saw the soldier he'd seen earlier that day. "Arrêtez!" the soldier called out. "Stop right there." Marcel slowed his bicycle down and stopped in front of the soldier. "I saw you before." The man had a different kind of accent to Marcel was accustomed to hearing. Maybe he came from somewhere near the French-German border. "What are you doing here?" "I'm on my way to visit my aunt and uncle, to bring them some bread." His heart banged hard in his chest, but he tried to look nonchalant as he gestured towards the white parcel. "And what's that?" The soldier pointed to the red and white checked parcel. "Pain d'épices." He lifted it out of the basket and peeled back the towel. The pain d'épices had just baked that morning, and the smelling of cinnamon, ginger and cloves was very tempting. Marcel's mouth watered, but he remembered what his father had said and held the cake up. "Here, take it. It's really good." The soldier looked down suspiciously, but he broke off a piece of the moist, spicy cake and ate it. Though he did not actually smile, his expression softened. "You can go." He took another large piece and put it in his mouth. Marcel got back on his bicycle and sped along as fast as he could away from the bridge. As he pedalled, he felt himself calming down, but his stomach rumbled and grumbled. There had been no bread at lunch, and he was still hungry. But the loaves of bread were still inside the basket. And his mother had only said not to give the bread to the soldiers. She didn't say he couldn't have a piece. He brought the bicycle to a stop and hopped off and untied the white cloth. Inside, the 2 round loaves looked fresh and delicious. The dark, chewy peasant breads were one of the specialties of the bakery. Marcel couldn't help himself. He had to have a big piece right now. Aunt Marie-Pierre wouldn't mind. She always fussed over him when he went to visit. Marcel sat down by the side of the road and, using his little penknife his father had given him for his last birthday, he began to cut through the bread. He ate the first bit quickly and was still hungry. He tried to cut another piece, but this time he was having trouble. The knife wasn't cutting. It seemed to be caught on something. He peered closely at the bread and wiggled the knife around. It looked like it was stuck on a piece of paper, tightly folded and wadded up. What was paper doing in there? Marcel extracted it and unfolded it. It was a note. He recognised his father's bold, quick handwriting on the page. "The St. Sulpice Bridge has gotten very crowded with visitors from all over. We need to change plans for our picnic and find another spot." Marcel read this once, twice, and then a third time. Picnics? Bridges? What could it mean? The St. Sulpice Bridge was where he'd been stopped by the soldier. Could the message have been something to do with that? But even if that was so, why hide the message about a picnic and a loaf of bread? Unless maybe it was a code of some kind. He read it yet again. It did seem like a coded message. Marcel pondered this. Who used codes? Secret groups who didn't want their communications to be easily understood. The resistance, the French freedom fighters secretly pledged to resist the Germans, was such a group. He knew about them from kids at school and from conversations he'd heard among the grown-ups. He'd seen some of the leaflets too, pass swiftly and quietly from hand to hand. Could his parents have something to do with all that? Suddenly, he wasn't hungry anymore. The Germans had invaded the free zone about 2 weeks ago. Marcel's father had sent him to his aunt's with bread several times since then. He'd never thought anything of it. He'd been delivering bread for them since he was 8 or 9. But in the past, he'd only gone once a month or so. But going multiple times in only 2 weeks was way more than usual. The trips he had made he'd made recently must have been about more than just delivering bread or pastries. Much more. He must have been carrying notes that were part of an effort to undermine the Germans. Maybe there had been a note in the bread he'd brought to Madame Trottier this morning. Maybe this explains Mother's anxious looks and her sharp voice. Even though he was sitting down, Marcel's heart was beating very fast, and his cheeks felt uncomfortably hot. He tried to put the pieces together in a way that added up to a different answer, but he could not. His father had written this strange note, and without telling him, it was inside a loaf of bread, given it to him to deliver to his aunt or uncle. The delivery seemed urgent too. There was only one explanation that made sense. Marcel's father, and no doubt his mother, too, were full-fledged members of the French resistance.